Welcome back, everyone, to Hinges and Horizons. I'm Jason Steffenhagen, the Associate Minister at The Well, United Methodist Church in Rosemont, Minnesota. And we are exploring the different hinge moments in people's life, those turning points where life went in a new direction, God is doing something, or maybe even something hard happened, and it just changed the trajectory of a person's life. And then finally, we're going to end every conversation with what's on the horizon for our lives. And today, I am honored to be with Cynthia Williams, the district superintendent for the River Valley District of the Minnesota Annual Conference. Cynthia, it's a pleasure to be with you.
It's good to be with you, Jason, and thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this podcast.
Well, we are excited to get to know you a little bit better. You've definitely been a familiar face at our church and in our area, and so we just really appreciate the work that you do, the way that you serve us. And so thank you for the guidance and the care that you put into helping build this community. And so thank you so much.
Thank you. You're so welcome. It's my joy.
Well, I can tell. And it's been fun for me in the last 8 months to get to know you better. So it's been a great time. So tell us about a hinge moment in your life.
You know, I've been thinking about, because I've had many hinge moments, but I took an 8-week renewal leave this summer. And the thing about that, I was so excited about this time of recovery coming through this part of the pandemic. And when I think about 2020 and everything that we had kind of gone through, I learned early in the spring, I'd read this book called The Body Keeps Score. And it's about trauma and how our body actually helps us to understand that. And it wasn't until like this summer reading that book, that I came to this deeper understanding of how my body, through the political unrest, through the racial unrest and protests and the reckoning, through COVID and all of that, I realized I've been holding in all of this trauma, and my body felt it all. And so here I am, the end of July, entering into my 8-week renewal leave. And I was so confused. It took me 5 weeks to get to a place where I was not exhausted. I had even gone off to a Quaker retreat center, and the silence nearly killed me. I was like, oh my God, I can't even enter into silence. And it wasn't until the 5th week, I was listening to this sermon by Otis Moss III, Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. And he was doing this sermon series on Sabbath. And up until this point, I was really confused about why I was so disconnected from God. I was feeling like I just don't even know if I can do church anymore. I was in this really confusing place because I love God and I love the church. So I hear this sermon, and in this sermon, he was preaching on Sabbath, and he said this thing that my hinge. He said, rest must come before worship. Rest must come before worship. And everything made sense to me. It was like all this time when I could not give myself permission, and I was confused about why I could not enter in. And it made sense because the truth of it, Jason, is I was really afraid that I would never worship again. And when I talk about worship, I'm not just talking about Sunday morning. I believe that we were created to be the praise of God's glory. And I believe worship happens. Irenaeus says a life that is lived fully alive. Is a life that is lived fully alive is a life that is lived for the glory of God.
Yep.
Or the better way that he says it is, the glory of God is a person living fully alive. And so when he said that, everything changed. So I had 3 weeks left. And I entered into that rest that I was longing for. And it was just, and I will tell you, I've been back from that leave. Now I'm almost 8 weeks in from being back in from that leave. And I am telling you, I'm exhausted, but I'm alive. And the other piece I want to say about that is what I learned from that is to trust our bodies. The whole time confused about why is my body not cooperating with me? Why can I rest? And I had been seeing my body as my conspirator.
Ooh.
And through that, when he said that, it was like everything about the body keeps score. My body is my collaborator, and our bodies help us to know when we're exhausted, when we are to rest, and we can trust that and trust that on the other side of that rest, life will come again.
Mm.
And we're able to live inside out in the way that God always intended. And so that's what I would share with you in
Yeah.
this brief moment.
No, that's really beautiful. I mean, the two phrases that you put so beautifully, rest comes before worship, which is what you got from that pastor, that sermon series on Sabbath. And then your body is not your conspirator out to get you, right? Out to hinder you, out to keep you from something, but it's your collaborator. Oh, those two ideas alone, rest comes before worship, your body is a collaboration with you.
Yeah.
That's something we can hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about, I was processing that more deeply. And I love the narrative where there's the bent over woman who enters into the temple. She's been bent over for 18 years, and Jesus is in the rabbi position, right? Seated, teaching in the temple, which means that she comes in bent over. And how often life bends us over, which is if our body is our collaborator, our body is inviting us to enter into this place to seek Jesus and know that when we seek, we will find. And Jesus sees us and names us and calls us forward again. Because the passage says that he saw her, he called her forth and he saw her, and it says she straightened up.
Yeah.
And then it says she began to praise God, which
Yeah.
is to say she was able, life looked altogether different. And so I've been holding all of that in this season, that when I find myself exhausted and bent over, enter in to the presence of the rabbi and know that I will be restored and able to go back out and live again in the fullness of who God has created and called me to be.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. I think our faith is such an embodied faith that we don't often talk about it that way, with such
Mhm.
a mental faith, right? We always think about, what do
Yeah.
I believe? What do I think? Theology and that thing. But what you're getting at is that gut faith, that there's
Yeah.
something deep in our bones, and which reminds me of the importance of, taking communion and the Eucharist and saying, I'm gonna take this in me, because there's something about it becoming bodily that is
Yeah.
transformative. And I'm meant to live right here and right now and on this earth and with these lungs, and and there's something beautiful about that.
Yeah.
But hard, right? It's hard to be in your body. It's hard to be
Yes.
present in a way.
And unfortunately, I don't think we teach that enough within the church.
Mm,
The fullness, when I think about, there is a lot of the head knowledge, there's
yeah,
a lot of the head. And then it's like there's heart. How do we integrate head and heart? And then how do we integrate the fullness of it? And that's one of the gifts of this COVID and pandemic, using the technology when you're Zooming, to be able to try different ways, body prayers,
yeah,
right? How do you use Zoom in a way that goes beyond just you and I looking at each other on a screen, but it's really connecting. And I think
yeah,
that it's an invitation for us.
for sure, for sure. So
Yeah.
tell, if you don't mind my asking, like, what have maybe been a couple of practices you've kind of alluded to, this, since this Hinge moment, since this 8-week renewal, and that week 5, kind of that real Hinge moment where you started to recognize the need for rest, and you've talked a little bit about being 8 weeks in and experiencing some of that exhaustion. But what have been some practices that have helped you get back into that restful place where worship can be
Yeah.
kind of the joy of who you are?
Well, it's the pieces of this photo that I paint.
Mm,
So one of the practices that I've had probably over the last 8 years is I do observe Sabbath. And how I observe Sabbath is I paint classical music, and it taps into a whole different part of my senses and being, and it's very restful for me because it's very joyful,
mhm.
right? And so there's that aspect, and then we live in Minnesota, but in the morning when I wake up, my body is asking me, saying stiffness or whatever, Cynthia, please take me for a walk.
Okay.
And so when I'm saying like really listening, and when like this morning it was raining and I didn't want to, but my body, my collaborator says, trust me, if you walk me, I will wake you up. Motion is lotion, and I will give you a second wind for whatever you encounter today. So it's really, really practical. It's in the ways that I eat. My body is my collaborator. So now when I prepare my meals, I look at my plate and I think of all of the people from all of the world that makes it possible. I had grapefruit yesterday, and it was from Peru. So it was an invitation to pray for the people from Peru and all of the people, my coffee. And so it's like really, it's a deeper awareness. And then out of that, what do you do? And so now it's like there's this deep gratitude and this deep way in which I'm seeing differently. And my prayers are shifting. My body is my collaborator. And so even that, it's like, even with the food, I have less patience for junk food now. It's like, please eat real food. You can identify it and you can imagine where it's come from and who grew it and who they are. And
That's beautiful. And I love that you're not pointing us to, and it's okay if someone does this, but you're not pointing us to some elaborate thing that takes a ton of work. You're talking about seeing food differently. You're talking about just pausing and putting on music that you know is going to be rejuvenating as opposed to distracting. And you're talking about being more present to yourself, which is something that all of us can do. You can do that in your home, right? I mean, that's the whole point of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is. And because you're right, there's nothing. I mean, of course, I also have morning devotion and I have spiritual readings in my time of prayer. That's integrated, but this is an expansion. So there's the things that the traditions and the disciplines that have carried me and carried many Christians throughout our life. But this is a heightened awareness and for me, it's that whole idea of living fully alive means to take in everything in new ways. And so whether it's the arts or whether it's food or it's being present to people, I'm an introvert. And when my body says you have no more words, go inward.
Right.
I've exhausted my friends. In fact, I'll tell them I've used all my words for the day. I have no more words. So it's like trusting. So trusting then, if I go into that place, I have no more words, new words will come. Right.
Oh, it's beautiful. That's beautiful. So tell me a little bit about what's on the horizon for you. And it might be just a continuation of what you've been experiencing with this Hinge moment, or it might be something else that is on the horizon.
Well, it's actually something I'm pretty excited about. And I've been praying and not quite sure how to get it off the ground. But this week, I'm starting to see some daylight. And I've been, even prior to this role, I love some of the work of Parker Palmer, and he's done a lot of work. And he has this book, Journey to the Undivided Life, A Hidden Wholeness. And I had created like these wisdom circles prior to this appointment, like in the local church. And so I'm actually in the process of gathering some people who really have this idea of what if the church truly could be brave space for people to do inner work in community. And so I want to play with this idea of what would it be for us to create these circles, and they are multi-ethnic, multiracial, intergenerational, gender blending, whatever, but to create, because the church should be the safest place, the bravest place in the world to do inner work in community, and it's one of the least. And that's the work that I'm really excited about. And we had initially talked about it through some of this anti-racism training, building the beloved community. And we have that training right now. But it was like, it has to be, it's bigger than that. Because I believe when we sit in those circles with the third thing, whether it's poetry or art or music, and we are sharing our stories, just like we're doing now, we share these stories and someone is holding that space. I'm just curious to see what might shift in the church. So I have a few people who want to play with me with that idea and then test it out in some places. So that's what I want to look to in 2022.
Oh, that's really neat. And it sounds transformational, right? I mean, I think that's what I hear you really highlighting, is that this is more than just another practice, but this is a transformational endeavor that could really move the church forward into the beloved community and into something really needed in our world.
Yeah. So. And honestly, I want to do this for people within the church, but it's as critical for people beyond the church.
Yep.
And so when I say those circles, I think those circles have to be open places. And so, because I think when I think about people who are not part of faith communities and they wonder, why? Why do I need it? I think these are the type of spaces people are longing for. Non-judgmental places, being spaces where I can be healed, even because we can trust people to not only to know their story, own their story, honor their stories. And it's in that I think healing comes.
Yeah. And it reminds me of that story. I don't remember even who the person that said it was. I know it's in the Gospels, but it's, I believe, but help my unbelief. Right? It's that recognition that I don't have it all together and I don't know if I ever will, but I know I need more than what I have, and let's meet in that space. Yeah.
So that's the work of my heart, and it's the work that I think on my journey it's what I most long for, because I absolutely know that I am where I am because I have had community like that has surrounded me. And many of the people in our churches have heard me say that they sang my song before I even knew I had a song. And they kept holding it and singing it back to me until I could hear the notes and the lyrics for myself. And now we sing it together. Yeah. But that's what they did for me. And that's what I want. That's what I want for others more than anything.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining me and joining us today on Hinges and Horizons. It's an honor to share your story and to hear it and to learn from it. And so thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty. And may God bless you as you continue the great work that God has for you.
Thank you, Jason. This was fun.